The hum of the private jet filled the air like a soft, constant drumbeat broken only by the clink of glasses and the low murmur of executives chatting in first class. It was supposed to be a smooth flight. One of those high-powered trips where deals were reviewed at 30,000 feet and money moved faster than the clouds outside. But instead, the cabin had become the stage for a scene no one would ever forget. At the center of it all sat Kendra Lewis, an elegant, black woman in a charcoal gray suit, her posture flawless, her presence commanding even when she wasn't speaking. She didn't need to. Her silence was often louder than any voice in the room. The executives around her, mostly middle-aged men in tailored suits, shifted uneasily. They had been trying all morning to dismiss her presence, treating her like some assistant tagging along, unaware, or perhaps refusing to acknowledge that she was the one signing their checks. That arrogance was about to explode into something far uglier. It started small, a sigh from the front of the cabin, a mutter about standards and appearance. Then came the flight attendant, Janelle, her heels clicking against the polished floor as if each step was an announcement. She stopped beside Kendra's seat, her face fixed in a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her voice sharp enough to slice through the cabin chatter. "This section is reserved for our premium clients. First class is not a welfare line." The words landed heavy, echoing louder than the engines themselves. Heads turned. A few smirks appeared among the executives, thinly veiled amusement at the insult that had just been delivered. Kendra raised her eyes slowly, her gaze calm but unyielding. "Is that so?" she asked softly. Her tone carried no anger, no rush of emotion, just a quiet steel that made even the smirking executives falter for a second. But Janelle wasn't finished. She leaned closer, her breath sharp with arrogance. "People like you don't belong here," she hissed. And before anyone could react, her hand struck across Kendra's cheek with a crack that seemed to silence the entire jet. Gasps erupted. A wine glass toppled. One of the executives muttered, "Oh my God," while another chuckled under his breath, as if entertained by the spectacle. Kendra didn't flinch. She didn't shout. She didn't even raise her hand to her cheek. Instead, she straightened in her seat, her eyes never leaving Janelle's face. And in that silence, in that terrifying calm, the entire cabin realized they had underestimated the wrong woman. The sting of the slap still hung in the air, though Kendra's composure made it seem as if it had never happened. She didn't touch her cheek. She didn't blink away tears. Instead, she leaned back slowly, folding her hands in her lap, as though the entire incident had been nothing more than an unruly gust of turbulence. The executives exchanged glances, waiting for an explosion that never came. Janelle, flushed with adrenaline and misguided confidence, mistook Kendra's silence for weakness. "You heard me?" she said louder now, making sure every pair of ears in the cabin absorbed her words. "This isn't your kind of space. First class is for leaders, not tagalongs." She gestured dismissively at Kendra's tailored briefcase, on the floor, as though it were evidence of her supposed inferiority. One of the executives, a silver-haired man with cufflinks that gleamed under the cabin lights, let out a chuckle. "She's right," he muttered, not quietly enough. "She probably snuck on the company jet." A few others smirked, trying to disguise their amusement behind sips of champagne. The arrogance was suffocating. Every insult, every glance dripping with condescension, built on the foundation of a single assumption, that Kendra did not belong. But if there was one thing Kendra had mastered in her rise to power, it was patience. She knew when to speak, when to stay silent, and when to strike. Finally, she broke her stillness with a small, measured movement. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a sleek, black leather wallet. Inside, gleaming against the soft cabin lights, was a Centurion card, the platinum of platinums, a symbol of not just wealth but status. She set it gently on the table in front of her, the metallic edge catching the light like a blade. Janelle's smile faltered. A hush fell over the executives. The smirks dissolved into something tighter, more uncertain. Kendra's voice was soft but firm as she spoke. "Do you know what this is?" she asked, not to Janelle alone, but to everyone who had witnessed the slap. "It is a reminder. A reminder that respect is not about your seat, your uniform, or your assumptions. It's about how you treat people. She let the words linger, let them settle into the silence that followed. Then she leaned forward, her eyes locking with Janelle's trembling stare. "And you," she said evenly, "have just made the cost of your arrogance higher than you can imagine." The cabin seemed to shrink. Janelle swallowed hard, her earlier bravado evaporating. The executives shifted uncomfortably, the reality of their miscalculation dawning on them. None of them could have guessed what Kendra had planned for the next 10 minutes. The engines roared softly in the background, steady and indifferent to the chaos brewing inside the cabin. The executives sat rigid, their laughter gone, their champagne untouched. The atmosphere was thick with unease, every second dragging heavier than the last. Kendra's calm voice had unsettled them more than any outburst could have. Janelle shifted nervously, her polished shoes clicking against the cabin floor as she tried to reclaim authority. "Ma'am, I didn't mean," she began, but her words faltered. The flight attendant, who had strutted through the aisle moments ago with arrogance, now looked like a child caught in a storm she hadn't expected. Kendra tilted her head slightly, studying her with the precision of someone who had spent years dissecting boardroom opponents. "Intent matters less than impact," she said evenly. "And the impact of your words, your actions, will echo louder than you realize." The executives avoided her gaze. For the first time, they seemed to notice the details they had ignored before. The quiet authority in her posture, the sharpness in her eyes, the way she didn't need to announce power because it radiated from her presence. One of them, a younger VP named Daniel, shifted uncomfortably, whispering to the man beside him, "Wait, isn't she?" But his words trailed off, as if speaking them aloud might bring consequences. Kendra reached for her phone, sliding her finger across the screen with deliberate calm. "Control tower," she said clearly, her voice steady. "Connect me with MacArthur Holdings." The name sent a ripple through the executives. MacArthur Holdings wasn't just a company, it was their company. The empire they represented, the contracts that bound their livelihoods, and Kendra wasn't calling for assistance. She was calling for judgment. "Wait a minute," the silver-haired executive stammered, his earlier arrogance replaced by a nervous tremor. "There's no need to escalate this. We can settle this privately." Kendra didn't look up. "No," she said simply. "This is not a private matter anymore. Respect, or lack thereof, is never private. It always leaves a mark." The voice on the other end of the line answered, crisp and professional. Kendra introduced herself not with a flourish, but with a truth that landed like thunder. "This is Kendra Lewis, owner and majority shareholder of MacArthur Holdings. We'll need to make immediate adjustments to the executive team." The color drained from the faces around her. Silence swallowed the cabin whole. In that single declaration, the power dynamic flipped completely. The woman they had dismissed as an outsider had just revealed herself as the architect of their careers and possibly the end of them. Janelle staggered back a step, her lips parting as if to protest, but no words came. The executives, who just minutes ago had been smirking into their champagne, now sat frozen in their leather seats, their polished confidence shattered. They looked less like leaders and more like schoolboys caught cheating on an exam. Kendra ended the call with a quiet tap, her phone slipping back into her jacket pocket. She didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. Every movement was deliberate. A reminder that true power rarely shouts, it whispers, and still it commands. The silver-haired executive tried again, desperation leaking through his tone. "Kendra, wait. Let's discuss this rationally. It was just a misunderstanding. Janelle overstepped, but we can resolve it." Kendra turned her gaze on him, her expression unreadable. "You laughed," she said simply. No anger, no theatrics, just fact, delivered like a blade to the chest. His face paled as if the weight of those two words had collapsed the ground beneath him. Another executive shifted, tugging at his tie as though it were strangling him. "We didn't mean any harm," he stammered. Kendra's eyes swept across the cabin, catching each one of them in turn. "Intent does not excuse complicity," she said. "You watched disrespect unfold in front of you. You encouraged it, and that makes you accountable." The silence that followed was unbearable. Even Janelle, who had been trembling in the corner, felt the sting of those words. Her bravado had evaporated entirely, replaced by shame that clung to her like heavy smoke. Then Kendra leaned forward, resting her elbows lightly on the table, her voice carrying the quiet rhythm of inevitability. 10 minutes, she said. That's all it takes to change the course of a career. 10 minutes to lose everything built over decades. 10 minutes to learn that arrogance is expensive. The younger VP, Daniel, swallowed hard. What? What are you going to do? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kendra's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, not cruel but resolute. I don't need to do anything more, she replied. You've already undone yourselves. I'm simply putting the paperwork in order. A shudder passed through the room. For the first time, the jet felt claustrophobic, as though the walls themselves were closing in. No one dared move. No one dared speak. Every eye stayed fixed on the woman they had tried to belittle, now revealed, as the storm about to sweep them all away. The hum of the engines no longer felt steady. It pulsed like a heartbeat, syncing with the dread that filled the cabin. For years, these men had believed themselves untouchable, insulated by titles and stock options. But now, in less than 10 minutes, the floor beneath their power had cracked wide open, and it was Kendra Lewis, the woman they'd mocked, who held the pen that could erase their names from the company's history. Daniel's hands fidgeted in his lap, his voice trembling. Ms. Lewis, please. I didn't laugh. I didn't say anything. He tried to separate himself, to build a fragile wall between his guilt and theirs, but Kendra's gaze pinned him just as firmly as the rest. Silence, she said, her tone sharp but calm, is not innocence. It is permission. The words cut through him and he slumped back, realizing there was no escape. Janelle, desperate to salvage her position, knelt slightly by Kendra's seat, her arrogance gone, replaced with frantic pleading. I'm sorry, ma'am. I was wrong. Please don't let this ruin me. I need this job. Her voice cracked, the edge of her professionalism gone, replaced by naked fear. Kendra looked at her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she said, this is not about your job. It's about the dignity you stripped from me the moment you decided I was beneath you. Actions have consequences. Her words weren't cruel. They were measured, like a judge passing a sentence. The silver-haired executive tried once more, sweat beading at his temple. Kendra, the board! Kendra's hand rose, silencing him instantly. The board answers to shareholders, and I am the majority shareholder, which means, effective immediately, this board is mine to reshape. The men exchanged panicked glances. In their eyes, calculations spun wildly. Bank accounts, reputations, families who depended on the careers they had thought unshakable, and all of it teetered in the hands of the woman they had just reduced to a punchline. The cabin door clicked as the co-pilot stepped in, oblivious to the tension. Ms. Lewis, he said respectfully, we'll be landing in 15 minutes. Should I have the car ready at the private gate? Yes, Kendra answered smoothly, her voice steady as stone. And inform the company office to gather legal staff. We'll have immediate changes to announce. The executives froze at her words. No escape, no delay. The consequences would arrive the moment the wheels touched down. Janelle sank into a seat, pale and trembling. The executives stared at the floor, and Kendra, calm as ever, gazed out the window at the endless clouds. Her reflection in the glass sharper than steel. The wheels of the jet touched down with a soft thud, but inside the cabin, the silence was deafening. No one dared speak. The executives sat stiff, their confidence dissolved into fear, while Janelle clutched the edge of her seat, her earlier arrogance nothing more than a memory she wished she could erase. Kendra stood as the plane slowed, her movements precise, graceful, unshaken. She adjusted her jacket, gathered her briefcase, and looked around the cabin one final time. You believed you could define me by the color of my skin, by your assumptions of where I belong, she said softly, her voice carrying more weight than a shout ever could. But power doesn't come from the seat you occupy. It comes from the respect you give. No one replied. They couldn't. The jet door opened and sunlight spilled into the cabin, harsh and blinding. Waiting on the tarmac were black cars and a line of legal staff, clipboards in hand. As Kendra stepped forward, the executives realized their world was no longer theirs. She wasn't just firing a team, she was rewriting the rules of respect and accountability. Janelle whispered a broken apology, but Kendra didn't turn back. Some lessons were meant to scar. With her heels clicking against the jet stairs, Kendra walked into the light, not as someone wronged, but as someone victorious. And behind her, the silence of those who had underestimated her was louder than any applause.